Patty Loveless and Vince Gill. Their voices, woven together in haunting harmony, told stories of heartbreak, faith, and redemption. For years, fans wondered if there was more behind their musical connection, a bond that seemed to run deeper than friendship, deeper than collaboration. Now at 68, Patty Loveless has finally decided to break her silence. In a rare and emotional conversation, she opened up about her long friendship with Vince Gill, one that has been the subject of whispers, admiration, and endless speculation throughout country music history. From their early days on Nashville's stages to unforgettable duets like My Kind of Woman, My Kind of Man, Patty and Vince built a partnership rooted in trust and mutual respect. But as their careers soared, personal struggles, rumors, and life-changing loss began to cast shadows on what had once seemed unshakable. For years, Patty remained silent, choosing dignity over drama, privacy over gossip. Yet now she's finally ready to tell her side of the story, how their friendship began, what truly bound them together, and why their connection has endured despite fame, heartbreak, and time. This isn't a tabloid confession. It's a story about love, faith, and the kind of friendship that can only be forged through pain and music. And when Patty speaks, every word carries the weight of a lifetime spent chasing truth through song. Long before Patty Loveless and Vince Gill became country icons, they were simply two dreamers trying to make their way in Nashville's tough, competitive music scene. The 1980s were a golden era for country music, but also a ruthless one. Only the strongest voices and truest hearts survived, and in that whirlwind, two paths quietly crossed, forming a bond that would endure for decades. Patty Loveless was still finding her voice after years of struggle. Born in Pikeville, Kentucky, she grew up surrounded by mountain music, gospel harmonies, and the haunting echo of Appalachian soul. Her upbringing was humble, marked by hard work, loss, and an early understanding of heartache. When she came to Nashville, she wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing purpose. Meanwhile, Vince Gill was carving out his own place in the country world. Known for his angelic tenor voice and guitar mastery, Vince carried a quiet charm that drew people in, but behind his easy smile was a man wrestling with personal pain, loss, heartbreak, and the pressure of living up to Nashville's high expectations. Their first collaboration came almost by chance. A producer at MCA Records suggested the two record a duet together. What came out of that session surprised everyone. Their voices blended with effortless grace, his smooth and tender, hers raw and aching. It was as if they had been singing together their whole lives. From that moment on, Patty and Vince became inseparable in the studio and on stage. They weren't just collaborators, they were kindred spirits. They shared the same musical instincts, the same passion for storytelling, and the same respect for the purity of country music. "We never had to force anything," Vince once said. "It just worked." Our voices found each other. As their careers flourished, rumors began to swirl. Fans couldn't help but wonder, was there something deeper between them? Their chemistry on stage was undeniable. When they sang love songs, it didn't feel like performance. It felt real. Every glance, every harmony seemed to carry unspoken emotion. But both artists remained silent, allowing their music to speak louder than any headline ever could. Behind the scenes, though, their friendship was genuine and steady. Vince became a pillar of support when Patty faced her darkest moments. In 1996, when her brother Roger passed away after a long illness, Patty withdrew from public life. She stopped touring, rarely gave interviews, and spent years in quiet reflection. During that time, it was Vince who checked in regularly, reminding her that she still had something powerful to give through her music. "He never gave up on me," Patty later shared. "He knew I wasn't ready to sing, but he kept my spirit alive. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." When she finally returned to the stage, it was Vince who invited her to perform alongside him at the Grand Ole Opry. The performance was electric, yet deeply emotional. Patty's voice cracked as she sang, and Vince gently stepped in to harmonize, anchoring her, lifting her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. The audience erupted in tears and applause. That moment marked more than a comeback. It marked the rebirth of a friendship that had weathered life's toughest storms. And though they never addressed the gossip that followed them, those who truly knew them understood the truth. What they shared was beyond romance. It was something purer, a spiritual bond forged by music, loss, and loyalty. As the years went by, Patty and Vince continued to collaborate occasionally, but their relationship evolved into something deeper, quiet admiration. Vince once described her as the most honest singer I've ever known, and Patty said of him, "He's the kind of man who gives more than he takes. I owe him more than words can say." Now, decades later, as Patty Loveless finally breaks her silence, she isn't interested in revisiting gossip or fame. She wants to honor the truth, the kind of truth that only music can reveal. "Vince and I," she said recently, "we've lived a lot of life, but what connects us isn't just songs, it's grace." By the late 1990s, Patty Loveless and Vince Gill had become two of the most respected names in country music. Their collaborations weren't frequent, but every time they performed together, it was pure magic, raw, emotional, and heartbreakingly real. Fans didn't just hear the notes, they felt them. But behind that seamless connection was a friendship built on shared struggles and quiet understanding, something both of them had earned through pain. For Patty, success didn't come without sacrifice. She had battled years of self-doubt and exhaustion. The fame that once seemed like a dream often felt like a burden. "When you start out, you just want people to hear your voice," she once said. But when they finally do, the pressure to keep being perfect can break you. During that same period, Vince was enduring his own personal heartbreak. His first marriage to Janice Oliver, a fellow musician, was falling apart. The demands of touring and the emotional weight of fame had taken their toll. Through it all, Patty remained one of the few people he could truly confide in. They often spoke about the loneliness that comes with success, the quiet after the applause fades, the long nights on the road, the feeling of being adored yet isolated. "We understood each other," Vince later admitted. "We'd both seen the best and worst parts of this business. Patty was someone who got it, who got me." When Vince released his album High Lonesome Sound in 1996, many fans noticed how deeply emotional his performances felt. One of the standout tracks, My Kind of Woman, My Kind of Man, was a duet with Patty. The song became one of the most powerful collaborations of their careers, winning hearts across the country. The chemistry between them was so palpable that even the most seasoned critics couldn't ignore it. But Patty, as always, chose to stay silent about the speculation. To her, the music was sacred, and she refused to let gossip overshadow the art. "People will always create their own stories," she later said. But the truth was simple. We shared respect, trust, and music. That was enough. Over time, their friendship deepened into something even more profound: mutual healing. Both artists had endured painful losses and life changes, and both found comfort in the one constant that had never failed them: music. Vince, now remarried to Amy Grant, once said that Patty's friendship remained one of the few unshakable constants in his life. "Patty's like family," he said. "She's been there through everything, the good, the bad, the quiet years. That doesn't go away." Their performances together became rare but deeply emotional events. In 2013, when they reunited at the Grand Ole Opry for a special tribute performance, the audience was spellbound, singing "Go Rest High on That Mountain," a song Vince wrote in memory of his late brother. Patty's voice trembled with emotion as she joined him in harmony. It wasn't just a duet, it was a spiritual experience. You could see it in their eyes, in the way they leaned on each other's voices for strength. That night became one of the most talked about moments in Opry history. Many in attendance said it felt less like a concert and more like a prayer. Vince later revealed that performing with Patty that evening was one of the most meaningful moments of his life. "When Patty sings," he said softly, "it feels like God's whisper." But for Patty, that performance also carried something deeply personal. She later admitted that it reminded her why she fell in love with country music in the first place, not for fame, not for applause, but for truth. "Vince brought that truth out of me," she said. "Every time we sang together, it was like telling the world, we're still here. We survived." Now, looking back at nearly 4 decades of friendship and music, Patty reflects on what made their bond last. Vince has the biggest heart, she said recently. He's the kind of person who gives quietly, who lifts others up without ever needing the spotlight. That's rare in this world. Their story isn't about romance or scandal. It's about loyalty, respect, and the kind of connection that can only be built through shared pain and shared grace. And as Patty continues to open up in her own words, one thing becomes clear. Her silence was never avoidance. It was protection. She was protecting the kind of friendship that fame can't touch and time can't erase. For years, the rumors surrounding Patty Loveless and Vince Gill's relationship swirled through the country music community like wildfire. They had undeniable chemistry, the kind that made audiences lean forward whenever they sang together. Their voices, when blended, created a harmony so rich and emotional that it made even the toughest hearts melt. Songs like My Kind of Woman, My Kind of Man didn't just sound like duets. They felt like confessions. Fans began to wonder, was there something deeper between the two beyond the music? At the height of these whispers, both artists kept a dignified silence. Vince was still married to country singer Janice Oliver at the time, and Patty was devoted to her own husband, Emory Gordy Jr., a respected musician and producer. Their professional lives often overlapped, recording sessions, stage performances, and award shows, which only fueled more gossip. But behind the scenes, what really existed between them was a profound artistic respect and emotional connection born from shared experiences of loss, love, and the pressures of fame. Patty once mentioned in a rare interview that Vince understood her better than most people in the industry. "He knows where I come from," she said softly. "He's walked through the same fire." Both had weathered personal storms, from heartbreaks to career lows, and that shared vulnerability made their collaborations feel almost sacred. Their bond was one of empathy, not scandal. But the public, always eager for drama, kept twisting their friendship into something more. Vince Gill himself often deflected those rumors with grace. He once laughed during an interview, saying, "When you sing with someone who makes you feel that much, people assume it must be love. But sometimes it's just the music." Yet even his gentle humor couldn't stop the speculation. Country music fans saw what they wanted to see: two souls harmonizing perfectly, a chemistry too strong to ignore. When Vince's marriage eventually ended, the gossip only intensified. Headlines screamed about an alleged affair, claiming Patty had something to do with it. But she refused to play into the media circus. Instead, she distanced herself quietly, focusing on her music and her marriage to Emory, who stood by her unwaveringly. It was one of the hardest times of her career, trying to protect her personal life while staying true to her art. In later years, when the dust finally settled, Patty began to open up about that chapter, not with bitterness but with gratitude. She acknowledged how those collaborations with Vince had shaped her artistry. "We brought out something real in each other," she said in a reflective tone. It wasn't about the noise. It was about the truth in the song. The two would occasionally reunite for special performances, and whenever they did, that same emotional spark reappeared, timeless and pure. Fans could still feel the magic, but now it carried the weight of maturity and peace. They didn't need to prove anything anymore. Their connection had transcended gossip. It had become a lasting piece of country music history. Patty once summed it up perfectly in a backstage interview years later. "What Vince and I shared on stage was honesty. That's all, and honesty in music, that's a rare and beautiful thing. In the end, it wasn't romance that defined them, but respect." They were two artists who understood that sometimes the deepest connections don't need to cross personal lines. They simply exist in the songs that will outlive them both. And as time went on, fans began to see it too. The story of Patty Loveless and Vince Gill wasn't a tale of forbidden love or heartbreak. It was a story of musical souls intertwining at just the right moment in history, leaving behind a harmony that still echoes through every chord, every lyric, and every heart they ever touched. As the years rolled by, Patty Loveless quietly stepped back from the bright lights of fame, choosing peace over pressure. The constant touring, recording, and public scrutiny had taken its toll, and she longed for a simpler life away from the noise. She and her husband, Emory Gordy Jr., retreated to their home in the mountains of Georgia, surrounded by nature and music, the two things that had always grounded her. Vince Gill, too, moved forward in his own journey. Though their paths occasionally crossed at industry events or tribute concerts, both had found their own sense of peace and fulfillment. Vince found lasting happiness with singer Amy Grant, and Patty, ever devoted to Emery, built a quiet life that reflected her humble roots and strong faith. But fans never forgot the magic she and Vince once created together. When asked in later years about Vince, Patty's response was filled with warmth. "He's one of the finest human beings I've ever known," she said in a soft voice. "I'm proud of what we made together. It came from the heart." Her words were simple but carried a lifetime of respect and affection. She never let rumors or speculation stain what they had built musically. To her, the truth was in the songs, and that was enough. Her decision to step away from the stage wasn't easy. Country music had been her life since she was a teenager, and leaving it behind felt like saying goodbye to a piece of her soul. But as the world changed, so did she. "You reach a point," Patty once explained, "where you realize the applause isn't what keeps you alive. It's the quiet moments. The love you share with the people who never left your side." Even in retirement, Patty's influence continued to ripple through the next generation of country artists. Singers like Miranda Lambert, Carly Pearce, and Ashley McBryde often cite her as one of their biggest inspirations. Her voice, that haunting, mountain-born tone, still stands as a standard of authenticity in a genre that's often accused of losing its roots. Vince Gill himself has said that Patty represents the heart of traditional country, a compliment that moved her deeply when she heard it. In 2023, when Patty Loveless made a rare public appearance at the Country Music Hall of Fame ceremony to honor her peers, the audience erupted in emotion. Her presence reminded everyone why she was so beloved, a symbol of grace, integrity, and timeless artistry. When she performed a short acoustic rendition of "You Don't Even Know Who I Am," her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of memories. The crowd was silent, knowing they were witnessing a living legend revisiting her past with both pride and tenderness. Afterward, she spoke briefly to the press, and once again, Vince Gill's name came up. Patty smiled and said, "Vince will always be family. We came up together in a time when country music was about truth and storytelling. That's something neither of us ever lost." Her honesty was touching, and it brought closure to years of speculation. What they shared wasn't a secret affair or hidden romance. It was something far more enduring, a partnership built on trust, talent, and mutual respect. Today, at 68, Patty Loveless lives a quiet life, surrounded by the love of her husband and close friends. She still sings occasionally in private settings, her voice is pure and emotional as ever. And though she's far from the spotlight, her songs continue to speak for her. In every note of "How Can I Help You Say Goodbye" or "Blame It on Your Heart," listeners can still hear the woman who sang from her soul, unafraid to show her heart to the world. As for Vince Gill, he's never forgotten the bond they shared. In interviews, he often refers to Patty as one of the best voices God ever made. And perhaps that's the most fitting legacy of all. Two artists who met, made magic, and then gracefully went their separate ways, leaving behind a harmony that time itself can't silence. Patty once said, "I may not be out there anymore, but my songs still live, and that's enough for me." And truly, for anyone who's ever heard her sing, it's more than enough.